Mom, Dad, I humbly suggest you save some money and shop Amazon for back to school. It's for my growth, meaning my body's growing at an alarming rate. And clothes you buy me this year will be very small very soon. Plus, the clothes I love today will be out of style tomorrow. But at least your wallet doesn't have to be my fashion victim if you shop low prices for school at Amazon. Hopefully this is helpful. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to talk about people who feel that they're too smart for therapy. And I get a lot of these people, and we're going to explore what's really behind that assertion. And before we do that, please do subscribe. Just click on subscribe because then you will get to hear all my awesome episodes, including oral sex on women and why you hate who you hate and boundaries and neediness and attachment theory. And there's like a lot of them by now. So that gives you the full Dr. Psych Mom Show experience. And also, if you ever need therapy, you can go to Best Life Behavioral Health, which is my virtual group therapy website. I have people who work for me, and so more and more people are asking about that, so that's where you should try first. I don't have people everywhere in every state, but at least try me first. Okay, so today we are going to talk about people who think that they're too smart for therapy, and if you are one of these people, you probably haven't said it outright like that. You may be married to somebody who has said it like that to you about themselves, but what do these people mean? What they mean is that they've gone to therapists before and they've found it boring, and they have found that the therapist didn't really understand them and didn't get them, and these are usually people who have been told that they're very smart, they're high achievers, they're in the top echelons of their, either their job or just, their IQ test. Like they know that they're very smart, they're not bullshitting. I mean, there's people who say this, but they're not that smart, but I don't really meet those people. I mean, I guess there would be those people. But I mean, in terms of just straight out like intelligence or ability to succeed, there are individual differences in the world, and so there are people who are smarter than other people. But does this mean that you are too smart for therapy? Is there such a thing as being too smart for therapy? No, that's not real. Like, that is not a thing. So what the person means is that this therapist does not use the same kind of words I use, and they don't seem to be talking and moving as quickly as my brain moves, and basically I am bored. But think about it. The reason you're going to therapy probably is because you have some sort of interpersonal issues, and or existential issues with the meaning of life or interpersonal issues with people around you. And a lot of these could be fixed by you not thinking that you are always supposed to get the maximum efficiency and the max excitement or, stimulation out of every single encounter. There is always something that you can learn in therapy, even if it's to be more slowed down in a sense and more in the present and more mindful and more intentional. There is no time that you have an interaction with anybody that you can't learn something about yourself. And a therapist is trained to at least teach you certain specific skills or ways to reframe things, depending on the sort of therapist that you go to. So the idea of a person being too smart for therapy or being so bored by therapy is usually a that person issue, not a therapist issue. Certainly, everybody's not a good fit with any therapist, but if you try, like, let's say 3 therapists, and you can't get anything out of any of them, they're all too stupid for you, come on. How is this really making you look? It doesn't make you look like somebody who's so smart. It makes you look like an asshole. And this may be some of the reasons that maybe interpersonal relationships are not going as well as you would want, because you tend to condescend to people. And if they don't interact in this very narrow way that you, associate with high intelligence, then you dissociate from the activity and you look down on the person. And it's interesting because I've worked with a lot of people that are super high achievers and very smart, and a lot of them, it's like they get bored when they don't want to engage on something, or they think that you're barking up, that I, as a therapist, am barking up the wrong tree. So, for example, a lot of these, especially men, if we talk about family of origin, they're like, my family was fine, everything's fine, let's just move on. Now, I'm pretty smart, and so they're obviously not thinking, well, I don't know, maybe they think I'm stupid, but probably wouldn't keep coming back. But I don't think they think I'm stupid there. What I think they think is that I'm just wrong. So this is like another layer, is when people think that the therapist is just wrong. Like, what do you mean even just wrong? Like, if the therapist wants to talk about something, do you really think that there's going to be zero utility in it? Especially something like that. I mean, you could easily see that that's an avoidant attachment person. They don't want to think about any, parts of being a weak, vulnerable child. They like to move past that stage of their life, not really think terribly deeply about whatever climate it was in the home. Whereas, of course, this is essential in understanding your nature and your relationships with others as an adult. I mean, I deeply believe that. So it's just the most egregious example, I feel, of when people dismiss things that are very important because the conversation isn't moving in the direction that they want. So when you're in therapy, especially if you're the sort of person who's used to being the smartest person in the room, you really have to open yourself up to thinking and talking about things that you may not initially find interesting or useful. If this goes on for like months, then stop. Then therapy isn't helping. And you know what? Therapy does not help everybody. It really doesn't. You got to be a verbal and open-minded person to engage in therapy. If you're very closed-minded, which really is what I'm talking about here. These are smart people. Yeah, they get very high on IQ tests. They get very low on open-mindedness, though, because no matter, they could be like, oh, but I try all kinds of food, all kinds of exercise. I travel anywhere. Yeah, but the minute somebody says something that you don't like, you're done. So that's not open-minded. So if you are a person who really, for example, you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in psychology, you're interested in therapy, you're interested in the idea that there may be things that are sabotaging you from living your best life, right? But somehow every therapist disappoints you, then you have to do a deep dive on why. Because even therapists, like, people come to me with a lot of buy-in because I have a lot of stuff out there. I got books, I got this podcast, I got my website with all my posts, Dr. Psych Mom, right? So my social media, they even know who I am, that I have kids, everything. So, they know a lot about me. And even still, so they have buy-in, is my point. They know who I am. They know my style much more than the average person knows. The average person goes to a group practice and they get who they get. They pay insurance, they get who they get, and that's it. And people make plenty of progress, if they do that and they're open-minded enough. So if you're somebody who's even coming to me, right, and you have all the buy-in and you believe in things that I say and whatever, even still, people will get to certain topics and be like, nah, that's stupid. They won't say it directly. So I'm saying, even if this happens to me, imagine how much it happens to other people where there's not the initial buy-in. And I used to be those other people because, starting out in my career, I was in a group practice that people signed up for a therapist and they got who they got. And it was me sometimes, as a younger woman. And so when people get to certain topics and they won't talk and they think that it's stupid, this is just a rationalization. This is the way that this person's defense mechanisms work. It's called intellectualization and rationalization. Those are the classic defense mechanisms of this person who likes to stick to the realm of cognition versus emotion. So it could be me asking about family of origin that they don't want to talk about. It could be me talking about what their spouse may be thinking and they don't necessarily want to empathize with their spouse. It could be another idea about, what really went on in their upbringing, despite them saying it was fine, or whatever it is. If you find yourself to be closed-minded, and the closed-mindedness can be couched in many phrases, but the one that we're talking about now is the therapist is not that smart, therapist doesn't understand me, you got to think about you and why you're closed down to certain ideas. So you can really get anything out of therapy that you want to, and it's like 75% you and 25% the therapist. If you go in with an awesome open mind and you're ready to receive any feedback, then the person does not have to be a rocket scientist. They were trained, and they're interested in you, and they're generally a kind and supportive person. So you should be able to explore at least certain facets of yourself. And if you totally can't, and you've gone to multiple therapists, and people usually go, they kind of funnel down. So at first they'll go to a group practice and get anybody. Then they'll go to somebody that was recommended by a friend. And then by that point, then they'll come to somebody like me, who they've done a lot of research into, and they know like the fucking names of my children and shit, not really, but maybe sometimes. And then it's like, if none of these people at all increasing levels of specificity can help you, then why? And I'm not just talking about me. It's not certainly about my clients in particular. I'm saying if you have gone down this, journey, and you've done that usual thing of trying to progressively get more and more specific, highly trained experts, and still nothing works, then you have to think of what guard do you intellectually have up, and why are you so deeply committed to not changing? That is the key thing. So your spouse is probably very sad that yet another therapist has gone by the wayside because you've decided that they're an idiot, or they canceled too many sessions, or one time they didn't remember the name of your wife, or like whatever the hell your thing is. And I'm not saying therapists are perfect. I'm really not. Like everybody, including myself, has been to therapists of varying levels, But in every type of therapy and with every therapist, you should be able to get something. And if you're somebody who gets nothing, who's been seeing somebody for months, if not years, and really feels like you've not even scratched the surface, then you got to think about why. And I definitely feel that it could take a few therapists to get to the right person, but at a certain point, it's very similar to dating. So yeah, sure, don't marry the first person you go on a date with. But if you've been dating for like 5 years and everybody you think is an idiot or boring or ugly, guess what? Who's the common denominator? You. So if you can never find somebody that you click with, that is likely to be a problem that has pervaded your life in general. Constantly thinking that nothing or nobody is good enough, constant disappointment, constant, hyping things up in your head and then realizing that they're terrible after all. So usually this goes along with family of origin issues, ironically, right? As does everything. And if you feel you can never click with anybody, it's usually because nobody clicked with you when you were a child. You always felt misunderstood because nobody really understood you, which is frequently the case, especially for these people who are like super smart and they're in a family where, nobody really talks to them super much and they are not understood deeply by either parent. Maybe the parents' focus are on other children that don't seem to need as much help because or seem to need more help rather because they are not as successful academically. That's a common thing. So these kids were kind of like left to their own devices because they were highly successful at school, sports, what have you, but they never really got that parental attention, that click that made them feel understood. And so for the rest of their lives, including with therapists and certainly with partners, they keep trying to pursue that click. And they have this idea that if the person is just smart enough, right, then they'll click with them, and sure, everybody likes to feel like they're being challenged and that, that they're not, saying things that fly over the person's head. So if it's very important for you to see a smart, quote unquote, therapist, then yeah, you can see like through profiles and through all the various things, kind of what a therapist's style is and close on that. But then what happens, which bears out this entire theory, is that frequently people will tell me, yeah, I went to a therapist, guy was really smart, but he didn't really know anything about trauma or like whatever, like the thing is. So then they're always trying to get somebody that not only is smart, but then what's the next hoop that the person has to jump through? The person has to be trained in this modality. My favorite, I mean, like we have listservs, obviously. I think I've mentioned before, obviously therapists don't get referrals out of their asses. There's listservs where you say, okay, somebody called me that wants somebody who works with PTSD for a 30-year-old man. And does anybody have openings, right? So sometimes you get these things on the listserv and it's like, client wants somebody trained in emotionally focused therapy, only a PhD, not a social worker, preferably a female, and also somebody who has children themselves. It's like, man, and what about like unicorn? Do they also want that? Do they want the person to have a unicorn horn? Because what in the hell? You're being so detailed that it's almost like you're stopping yourself, even before therapy starts, you're stopping yourself from engaging because nobody is going to be this perfect entity that you can idealize and because it doesn't exist. So when I was younger and I got more people through being in a group practice, now everybody knows how I'm trained and how I talk and all of this. So I get a lot of real enthusiastic, motivated clients, which is great. But when I was younger, I would get people who were like, oh, you were trained cognitive behaviorally. You weren't trained psychodynamically. Oh, well, like, I don't know how much you could help me. Well, shit. With that attitude, certainly I cannot, because you already decided that I cannot. So if this happens to you with therapists where everybody isn't smart enough or they're not trained in this or that or whatever, ask your spouse, or if you're single, well, that, kind of proves that relationships, have been difficult, but ask a best friend, ask somebody, am I difficult? Do I have too many standards? Am I a high standards person to the point that you think that I'm picky and overly selective such that nothing can make me happy? And you're usually going to get a yes, because the ways that people interact in therapy and about therapy are microcosms of the way that they interact in general. And that's the entire idea of transference. And that's why therapy is so useful, because over time, the relationships I build with my clients, I see exactly how they interact at home and in all other aspects of their lives, because they're doing it with me in the room. And that's the most valuable information I get. And this closed-mindedness and making this hoop where like the therapist has to be some super genius if they're going to help you is just another variation of closing yourself off to experience, being closed-minded, rigid, and having this defense mechanism where you separate yourself from others because you don't want to be disappointed again as you were as a kid when somebody didn't get you, they didn't understand you. Instead, you want to almost like tell yourself already before it even starts that nobody can understand you so that you're not disappointed when they don't. But ironically, this stops them from ever understanding you because you don't bring your whole self to therapy. And people frequently, defense mechanisms are designed to stop us from being hurt in ways that we have learned that the world hurts us. So if you think that you are somebody who is going to not be understood, what better and smarter way to go into something than with a lot of cynicism? This is very adaptive when you're a kid, right? If you're a kid and your parents don't seem to understand you for shit, why are you going to keep thinking that they will? You're just setting yourself up to be hurt again and again. So it's very adaptive to get kind of this almost cynical, removed air, even as a child and adolescent, because you don't want to get hurt again by trying to confide in a parent who can't hear you or has no emotional bandwidth to empathize with you, etc. But then this same mechanism that was so adaptive in your childhood, you take it into adulthood and it stops you, it prevents you from getting emotional support and relational engagement that you really need and yearn for, because you have cut yourself off as a preventative mechanism, which again made sense when you're a kid, and now it's actually hurting you, as so many of the defense mechanisms learned in childhood, they all are not good later in adulthood, but it is very hard to train yourself to be very different. So if you got anything out of this podcast, it should be open yourself up to therapy, open yourself up to relationships, friendships, etc., with people who you may not think are, as smart as you, or as skilled as you, or as talented as you, or whatever, because this may be a you thing much more than you think. And you may be cutting yourself off from many useful relationships with humans, including the therapeutic relationship, because of this defense mechanism that used to be useful, but now it has run amok, and it is now very much not useful and is precluding deep and genuine and authentic engagement with other people. And if your spouse is somebody who says that therapists are constantly disappointing them, then send this to them, because it may be an interesting thing to spark a discussion. All right, talk to everybody soon, and please do subscribe.